Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Recorded live on the stage at STORE 2025 in Toronto, Simone Lumsden, Senior Vice President, Triangle Customer Loyalty and Triangle Retail Media at Canadian Tire, and Sandra Duff, founder of Another Story Consulting, joined me on the stage to take on some of retail's most essential topics. Beyond satisfaction, unlocking what drives consumers in 2025. We pick up the conversation after a brief presentation by Sandra on the current state of customer satisfaction in retail, and with Simone answering my question, what has changed in terms of loyalty drivers for customers, and what has altered in the loyalty environment within which we operate? Let's listen in now.
Relationship had a customer profile behind it, and we had all that information. And we built sort of third-party data sets to supplement that. But in retail, it's relatively new that we have all this data. So what's changed is that, I would say from a retail perspective, is you've got this data, but then now technology for all brands, for everyone, has allowed us to actually harness that data and actually do something with it and change the experience from the research to the engagement to the actual purchase.
Well, it's you said something really interesting, because I was in the loyalty game back to Club Z, and we had tons of data, but we had no means by which we could really harness it in any effective way. So I really, what you say really resonates with me, that kind of the difference between even 5-8 years ago in terms of just pure compute power to be able to manage that data. Sandra, one of the things, I love the framing of table stakes versus differentiators, and one of my favorite movies is The Incredibles. Everybody remember The Incredibles? A great movie, and one of the things in The Incredibles was, well, if everybody's incredible, nobody is.
Yeah.
So, we saw those 8s in terms of satisfaction, so clearly there's a remarkability, a remarkableness that needs to be there to differentiate you. If everybody's good, how do you stand out? How are you thinking about that?
Look, I think part of it is Canadians are pretty practically minded, generally speaking. I'm generalizing here. And we saw that in how they identify themselves as shopper profiles. But I think brands and retailers have an ability to create distinct roles and distinct relationships with groups of customers. But it's built on understanding, to Simone's point, like, what is that thing that I fulfill as a retailer uniquely to my customer side? And we were joking around because I said Canadian Tire is my husband's Sephora. Because he loves, he needs a garden hose at the start of the season, but he loves to be inspired. That's a very distinct role that Canadian Tire holds for him. And it's easier for, he finds it more enjoyable to go there than to just buy it off of Amazon or do something like that. So I think it's uncovering kind of like what is that relationship that you have with your customer, and then really building upon that, because I think that's going to create differentiation. You need to do all of the basic stuff, which is kind of, the table stake stuff. And it's not fun, and it's, a lot of work to do those things, but that's where the customer bar is. And then exceeding that is really, what is that relationship that you hold?
And can I just build on that?
Yes.
So if you look at Sandra's chart and the profiles, the one at the bottom that was in like 5%, 6% is the fun and inspirational. Like, I think the challenge for all of us in this room is to get more customers from that top bar of I shop because of price to that bottom bar, and I'm shopping because of fun and inspirational, right? Because obviously we can't differentiate on price. And you want to generate that excitement around the shopping experience. And this panel is about in-store presence. If you just want to get it done, you can order it online. Yeah. But people aren't ordering online, but they're having this dissatisfying experience when they go into the store. So how do we get more fun and inspirationals?
It's a great point, because it picks up on something I think Paco Underhill started writing about. My partner Steve Dennis continued, that buying versus shopping, right? Jobs versus joys.
Yep.
There's some things I just want to get done. I want a frictionless experience. Maybe it's delivered to the doorstep. Maybe it's I want to go through self-checkout. But then there's that other, and it's the same customer, right, who wants both experiences in different contexts. How do your advice to retailers about how they kind of, if experience and fun is a hidden driver, how do you bring that forward in a competitive way in a store environment?
For sure. I think one example of a company that's doing it really well is TJX, right? They have frequent rotation of product. The way that they do merchandising, it is still a mass business for them. The way that they present the product at the beginning of the shop and then kind of go through mass presentation behind, it still is fun for the customer. They're doing the things they need to do in retail, but they're thinking about the customer journey throughout the shop. And I think, new product is yes, important. Thinking about the adjacencies of products and kind of creating that blur sometimes for customers, seeing how things can go together, creating that inspiration, whether it's an apparel outfit or how this might look together, curated. They're a good example of doing those types of things. I think the other thing that's really important is fun and inspiring can also involve your staff and the frontline team. And I think too often they're very task-driven operationally, and there are opportunities to bring that fun and inspiration to how they interact with customers and that relationship that they create. Because retail, to your point, when you were talking about the difference between then and now, retail used to be a people business, very much so, and it still is. Technology aids it, but at the heart of it, it is still a people business. And so creating that dialogue with your customers can also be fun and inspiring.
Simone, let's talk about loyalty. I think of Triangle Loyalty, a loyalty program. So you and I would know, and many of us would know, that a loyalty program itself does not generate loyalty. That's kind of the paradox of loyalty programs. What is it about Triangle Loyalty and how you think about loyalty that it can actually engender that kind of relationship with a customer that builds on the trust, builds on what Sandra's been talking about?
It's a great question, and absolutely. And people might say to me, well, are you worried that the loyalty program is in the lower left? Goodness. But at the end of the day, that loyalty statement, and Sandra knows this from her years of research, and I've done a bit of research in my day, is that when you ask a generic statement about loyalty and rewards, what comes to customers' minds are those kind of groupings of rewards. I don't really know what it is. You're going to send me to some catalog with all sorts of stuff, and I'm kind of overwhelmed by the choices. And that's what they're thinking about, right? So coming back to your question, there's sort of two parts to it. So there's what actually generates loyalty inside a loyalty program. And it's about giving customers what they value. And in our case, we are all about delivering value. And our loyalty program is about Canadian Tire Money, which is actually the first loyalty program that existed in this country. It was the paper money. Everyone's got some.
Canadian Tire Money. Hands up, anybody still has some floating around in their glove compartments or whatever?
So we're not sending you to some website to choose a bunch of things. You're actually earning money that you can apply against whatever purchase you want in whichever banner you want. And so where we have work to do is to make sure we can clearly and effectively communicate the value of our loyalty program, which is really about giving money back into the hands of the customer so that the customer can actually use that against whatever they want to buy whenever they want to buy it. And that's not all of the loyalty that we get, but that's part of it, because back to Sandra's research, price, that's what I want, quality, value for what I pay for. The second piece of loyalty in terms of how you engender that with your customers is using their data well. And we are all about curating personalized experiences that make sense. So for those of you who have not seen our app, we have an app and we have offers. And some of you in this room, and you won't put your hands up, and that's okay, will have received an offer and wonder, what did I get that offer for? We still have work to do. So we are curating our offers. We do have models that actually try to get the best offer for Michael based on his historic purchases and based on the opportunity to have him shop with us, but it's not perfect. And so the algorithm keeps working and keeps learning and learns on new customers. So how we get better loyalty is getting that right more often, for example.
If loyalty perfection in terms of offer to customers a baseball game, what inning do you think we're in?
Are you asking a triangle or generally?
Let's say in general, because I know I've been shopping with a particular retailer that is talks a lot about their AI, and I still get wonky offers, like just nonsense offers. But I feel like it's moved forward.
We're not in one or two, we're in 6 or 7, and the reason I say that is because part of what we're trying to do, Michael, is entice you for that thing you haven't bought.
Sure.
So we are using all of your data to try to get you stimulated to think about a purchase you may not have purchased, for example, in one of our banners.
Something relevant, something remotely relevant, but as you know, loyalty programs are to increment my behavior.
Exactly,
as well, right?
Exactly.
The Triangle Loyalty has really evolved, if you think about it, and you brought it up from from the money, from Canadian Tire money, to now it's a pan-banner loyalty program. And what other ways are you thinking about evolving the program? It's you get your cash back. You clearly thinking hard about that, but now you've got this sandbox to play with, where you've got a wide range of customers buying a wide range of goods. So it's kind of a nice sandbox to work in, right?
Yes, no, we're very fortunate. I mean, just to sort of finish off on that last piece is that what we want to aspire to from an offer perspective and all the issuance of dollars is just to make sure that we are continuing to hone these algorithms so they make sense to you, but they make sense more broadly for all the different customers that we have. And in terms of where we're going from a loyalty perspective at Canadian Tire is we have these great new partnerships. So you will have seen in the press the new partners that we have, and those partners are hugely important to us because they just expand the ecosystem that we have, right? So the RBC announcement that you will have seen, very important to us because we actually now can have customers who either are not part of our Triangle program, sure, or shoppers who don't shop as frequently with us now being able to come into our ecosystem and earn our earn our currency to shop back into our stores when they wouldn't have naturally thought of that initially, but it's through a completely different front door, we'll call it, which is the RBC credit card.
I mean, it's getting back to coalition program math in some ways. How do
Exactly.
I find lookalikes and bring them into my program? Let's talk about the other half of your job description, which is retail media. And let's connect those dots. This isn't a session about retail media. That could be a whole session of itself. But how does that retail media ethos and objective connect to customer experience and loyalty? And how are you thinking about how those two intersect? Sometimes the risk I feel sometimes on retail marketing is it can go too far into making money and impact customer experience and loyalty if you're not careful. I haven't seen it yet, but how do you think about those guardrails and how you're evolving it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for us, from a retail media perspective, what we're trying to do is, again, use that great data to work with our vendor partners to bring ads to our customers that are relevant in the journey that they're in. So initially, that would be online, popping up ads on a banner when they're searching for certain products. It can be on email, which is targeted directly to the customer, again, based on their shopping preferences. So that's kind of where we're starting. We are moving to in-store, and we're talking about in-store today. And in-store, it's actually, I'll go back to something I did with Michael when we were in New York, and we had this great visit down to one of the stores in New York, and we saw really what I would call best practice for retail media in store. And what was best practice about it is that the ads related to the category that were visually where you wanted them to be, and you could see them and you could connect the dots between, oh, the salad dressings, and this is about salad dressing. I care, I don't care, there's a coupon, there's not. As opposed to what you see in a lot of the inertial installations of retail media is, front of the store. Who is remembering that ad when they're down on aisle 4? 0 people, right? Yeah. So that's one of the things that is tricky about retail media, Michael, just to put a finer point on it, is not being disruptive to that experience. Mm-hmm. And we have to be especially careful about our brand and about, for example, the experience on the app. Because I have seen some examples of apps where if there's so many ads, you got to, yeah.
Would you like a Ford F-150
yeah.
with that oil change?
And you can't scroll. You got to keep scrolling to get the product that you want. Because
it is. I think it is a big question in that sector of the industry is customer experience versus retail media and how to saw those two things off, right?
Yeah, and we're very careful about the guardrails because we don't want to have a negative customer experience because customers are not very tolerant of that. Then they just tune you out and they're like, okay, I'm not going to actually shop on the app right now. There's too much stuff. I'll go on my computer, I'll do it later, and then I don't do it later, and then I don't have the shopping experience.
Sandra, there's lots of talk about, when we looked at customer satisfaction rates, mm-hmm. and we've been talking about parity and differentiators, and generally customers are pretty satisfied, right? So what's your advice from your experience and your observation of that data, how to break through, and can you connect it to loyalty programs and the mechanics that retailers and the levers that retailers can pull?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely something that retailers need to chip away at because there is so much work to do in just meeting that customer expectation. Like that's a lot of kind of hurdles to cross and operational things to do, right? But I think what sits on the top of that, like that reward to kind of break that general satisfaction, is really focusing in on those differentiators. And I think as part of that customer experience in the physical store, thinking about that programming for your store, I think a lot of retailers think about, I'm going to do store of the future, and I'm going to create this like shiny bubble. I think they want to put everything into that. I think, strip that back, think about what your customer's unmet needs are, where are the opportunities to differentiate with that customer, and then say from that strategy, what should that store experience look like?
Yeah. We like store pilots, though. We like that.
Yes, 100%. But they don't need to be 3 years out. Store of the future involving 53 task force and like all of that kind of stuff.
And they have to end.
Yes.
Which is kind of like, I don't know if you've been watching in the McDonald's launched a new brand called Cosmics.
Yeah.
And it was a new concept thing. And a big organization launches a big brand, and there's probably a lot of momentum to not kill that brand if it's not doing well. But they killed it, right? It's just okay. We learned what we learned. We're going to move on, right? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about.
Yeah. So they brought that product into McDonald's.
Right. They learned. Okay, it's not going to sustain on alone, but we learned something from it. Enough is enough. Let's talk about innovation and loyalty programs. It's interesting when you're talking about the cash back versus the catalog. So it gets me back to my Club Z days. Remember, you get the big catalog and you could redeem your Italian lira-like loyalty points, your million points. And when we talked to customers, there was this thread that they said, well, if I get cash back, I feel like I have to spend it on my family. Like I feel like at the cash I'm going to buy the diapers because that's what I'm going to do. But if it's a fancy toaster that I wouldn't buy, maybe I will redeem it. Now, there's lots of puts and takes in that. And then we talked about just experiential things when we were at Hudson's Bay and thinking about loyalty. Maybe it's valet parking at the Queen Street location. Talk about innovation as you think about it in loyalty programs that way, outside of the not just table stakes, they're also differentiators.
100%.
How are they growing?
I think it follows the same theme, right? What are you thinking about for that customer? What do they value as part of that loyalty experience? What would be different for them to kind of break across a parity of points? We all have points programs and different points programs. And it's understanding those insights of those shoppers. It's really interesting. I'm going to date myself, but I was working on the Loblaw account. I wasn't at Loblaw, but they were introducing beauty into their grocery stores. And the insight that came back from women was they were using their points to buy beauty products because it was a treat for them, right? So understanding like what is driving them, what do they want, what are they looking for, what's attractive to them, and don't make it a silo, right? Don't make it like this is for the loyalty box. It's the entire customer experience. It just sits in a different phase of that customer experience. So these insights should really be looked at in totality and think about, okay, if people are looking for newness, if people are looking for fun and inspiring, what element of that can reside in loyalty, not just in another area of the experience?
And Simone, how do you think about that? Canadian Tire's got such a rich palette of community engagement at the local level, at the, I think of women's hockey, for example, that there's a lot going on in the Canadian Tire world that could maybe form its way into thinking about loyalty. How do you think about that?
It's interesting. For sure, I think the experiences that we deliver as a brand and as a collection of brands really help with the loyalty program. So not totally related, but more sort of leapfrogging off something that Sandra was talking about is just the in-store experience and building that out. So we have new format stores launching with both Marks and with Sport Chek. And these are phenomenal stores. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to check out the Sport Chek one in the Etobicoke. And those experiences bring people close to our ecosystem because they have an enjoyable, fun and inspirational experience in one of our stores. So we don't deliver that everywhere, obviously, but the more you're thinking about where you can be unique, the more they associate that back to the ecosystem. To your question specifically about community engagement, I mean, we are very, very involved in the community. I mean, our stores are 15 minutes from every Canadian, so we are embedded, and our stores were a dealer model, so the dealers own their stores. So they are deeply committed to their neighborhoods and their communities, and they run a whole bunch of events that are on their own initiative or in partnership with Corp. And that is hugely beneficial to our customer base. And I love what Sandra said, like we try not to think of, well, loyalty, like you're in the loyalty program. We have a loyalty program, it's called Triangle, but we have an ecosystem across our entire group of companies that serves everybody, and anyone who would like to join our program, there's no cost, can join our program. The other thing to think about with loyalty, and for all of you as you're collecting this data, is whether you are driving membership for your loyalty program or not, depending on your objectives, the data that you have can inform your entire set of stores and your assortment. So we don't use all that data just to fuel the Triangle program. Of course, we use it for that in the ways I've talked about, but we have all this data about how people shop. I mean, Jobs and Joys of Canada. So we use the data that we have to bring product and assortment vitality to the business, which is a huge part of engendering loyalty generally, small L loyalty, to our ecosystem, which is a lot of what you talked about.
And I'm sure it would point you in the direction of the collabs you've got with like Petco or the Party City collab. People are looking for that, so let's put more focus on that, test it, pilot.
Yeah.
Last couple of minutes we have left, we'll turn to advice for the folks in the room. Sandra, I guess as you think about loyalty and your data, I'm going to frame it in 2 starts and 1 stop.
Okay.
As they think about loyalty and building loyalty, differentiating, telling remarkable stories. You know, sometimes people buy the story before they buy the product. 2 starts, 1 stop advice.
Definitely start listening to your customer, and by that I mean like uncovering not just what they're telling you, but what is satisfying to them and doing that deep analysis. So that's like start with that. Start doing some pilot test and learns. I think, you know, these bigger store formats are 100% great to kind of explore, but in the meantime, start with those baby steps, because you can probably learn a lot by leaning into some of those differentiators at a micro level and then apply them more broadly. The other thing I'd say is like stop keeping insights in a silo. Everybody in your organization should understand your customer. Everybody in your organization should understand what motivates them, what those table stakes are, and what differentiates them. And I think the other thing is, especially at the front lines, engage them so that they know what their role in meeting the customer where they are, what their role is, because I think that's going to be very powerful for staff.
All right. Simone, last words to you. Advice to the folks in the room of all sizes of retail.
Well, I would say we haven't talked about agentic AI today, and I don't want to use all the fancy words, and no one should think, oh, I'm behind, I don't know what that is. But what I would say is start just being curious. So agentic AI is going to change the shopping experience, because you're going to go online and you're going to have the ability to get a bot, help you navigate, get to the product that you want for the price that you want across all sorts of sites, all sorts of retailers. Like, that is coming. The way we shop is going to change. But guess what? It's not going to change quickly. But if you start sort of dabbling in it, listen to a podcast, and if you don't have one on it, you'll get one soon, I'm sure. There's all sorts that's out there, and it can just really stimulate your thinking, because that's what your consumers are being exposed to all the time. And even if they're not ready to do it, they're thinking about it. So that's a start. The other start is innovation. So retail media is an innovation. What can you do to use that data for new revenue streams? Like, that's what retail media is. It's a brand new revenue stream that's incremental. What can you do back home that's new and different that will bring in new revenue? And then I guess the only stop is don't assume something that didn't work a few years ago or before won't work again or can't be tweaked or modified. It's a little like the test and learn.
Yep.
Yeah, don't just pack it up and put it away. I mean, they learned something from that, right? I'm waiting for them to bring back the pizzas personally. But, you know, all brands learn when they fail in some way. So anyway, that's what I...
You know, I could do a whole session on agentic, because I think it's risk and opportunity for retailers in the room, because now you're going to have this intermediary before you steering customers to you or away from you. So it's a great thing to bring up. That's a whole other session.
It is.
We'll talk about that again. So thank you both for joining me on the stage today. Sandra's great insights. Simone, thanks for sharing everything that's going on at Canadian Tire. Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker. If you want more content or to chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.